Action on the Dhamma. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. So nice to see everybody here today. Our kind of Tuesday meditation. Oh, it's doing something. Is it still on?
Yes.
Okay. We kind of have fun with these phones, you know. So today, so soon heading out on a kind of trip, and wanted to make sure that I had this phone that would operate in Sri Lanka. So it's kind of like looking on the internet, like what kind of phone, you know, would work. And then found this phone on eBay that actually my mother has the same phone. And so I thought, okay, this is probably a good phone. And so the phone arrived and, started using it for a bit. And all of a sudden it shut down. And then I turn it back on and it's like, your device needs verification. You know, you have to reset your device. So then I was like, what's a reset? So I reset it. I figured out how to do that. And then after resetting it, it started again, and then it got stuck in what's called this boot loop, where it kind of starts to boot, and then, okay, it won't ever go to the actual, like, phone screen. It just stays on the Samsung screen, kind of going like this. So then I thought, well, maybe it's the battery, you know. And so the battery got replaced. And then today I was looking at it again, and it gets really, really hot when I start to use it. Like when there's a SIM card in it, it starts to get really, really hot, like 60 degrees. And I think they're supposed to be like 40 degrees. And so today I noticed there was no SIM card in it. And because I was like, okay, I'm just going to use my trusty old phone here, you know. And it was really cool. So then on the way here, I was thinking, well, what's up with this phone? Is it like a hardware phone, a software problem, whatever it might be? And it's kind of an interesting thing because I was talking as well to somebody the other day, and they're in the kind of healthcare profession, and that person worked as a dietitian, and they work in ICU, and they were saying that there was a lot of stress, you know, working in the ICU, because, you know, their job is to kind of care for people, but a lot of the people in the ICU don't make it. It's kind of just you know, some of them, well, you shouldn't say, she said some or many, something like that. And so I said to her, you know, this is the way that it kind of works. You know, kind of, she asked for advice. I said, well, one of the things that we try to do when we come to practice is we put our attention less on the outcome. I mean, the outcome is still important, and judging how well we're putting causes into place. But we put a lot of our weight on our intentions in doing something. And a lot of this is because there's elements in life that we just can't really predict. It's kind of like the exact same phone from the same person that my mother got the phone from. And, you know, my phone is kind of like very different kind of personality than her phone. You know? Or we put in our best kind of efforts to kind of heal somebody, and they don't get well. It kind of just doesn't work out. And sometimes the opposite. You know, we put something in place, we plan for it, and it all works out. And so I remember when I was young, I used to listen to this group, and they were called the Outcasts, you know, kind of this group from from down south, kind of a hip-hop group. And they had this line in one of their songs, which was like, you can plan a pretty picnic, but you can't predict the weather. You know, so, in other words, if you plan the picnic, a really good picnic, and the weather's good, okay, everything comes together. But if you plan a really pretty picnic, and things kind of don't work out, then that's it. You just can't do anything about that. And so this is one of the reasons why in Buddhist practice, the Buddha, well, not one of the reasons, he lays emphasis on this because it's the way it is, but we tend to place a lot of emphasis on intentions. So there was, in the West, one of the things talking to this person who was in healthcare was that there's a lot of emphasis on outcome. So in other words, by whatever means an outcome comes to be, if it's a good outcome, thumbs up. If it's a bad outcome, thumbs down. And there's metrics to measure that. There's mathematical things, there's statistics to see how well people are doing at their jobs, to see which way the economy's going, to see all these various things. And these statistics are outcome-based. They're based on an end result. But to get to a particular end result, there's a lot of different ways that a person can take. A person can take way X, way Y, way Z. And not all of the ways that a person might take to get to an end result are going to be beneficial in the long run. Some of them produce kind of short-term benefits through whatever means, but long-term bad results. So you can, especially if you're a business person or whatever it might be, if you're working in stocks, you can get very quick short-term results. But sometimes that has very bad kind of, if you do it in the wrong way, it has bad long-term effects for the company. And a similar thing, I remember when I was young, I used to like to go to the gym and lift weights when I was in high school. And one time my friend came with these kind of like bottle of pills. It's like, here we got these pills. And look at the side of this bottle of pills, and there was like 400 milligrams of caffeine in one pill. And then there was like this, like some, he's like, these pills are banned, And apparently people had started getting heart attacks when they took them. And it contained this substance as well that made your caffeine levels or your energy levels go up, but made your heart palpitate. So anyways, being young, I decided to take some of these pills. It would have been a lot nicer if the story just ended and I didn't take any. But in any event, I decided I'd try to take them. You had all this kind of energy when you're working out, like, oh yes, this is amazing. And I would take them and go to like Taekwondo class. And then I noticed, I was like 19, I noticed I started to break out into cold sweats. I was like, what's going on? I'm having these kind of like cold sweats. And so I went to the doctor and I was like, I'm taking these pills and I'm breaking out into cold sweats. And he's like, well, it's because of this ingredient. Like this ingredient in the pill makes your heart palpitate, And so I think that's why they were banned. So anyways, a good kind of a lesson not to, so I stopped taking them, not to take banned gym supplements, which may be banned for a particular reason. But in any event, taking those gym supplements for a short period, you could achieve a particular result. You could lift a lot more weight than might have been able to previously. You can go to a Taekwondo class and maybe have a lot of energy to win your match. And these are kind of short-term outcome-based results. If we were looking at kind of statistics, looking at kind of numbers, okay, the numbers are looking good. They're going up. The trend is heading upwards here. The numbers are stacking up. But in fact, the way that result was coming about was heading for disaster. Even though the kind of numbers look like they're going up, it was heading for a crash. Kept going that particular direction, so stopped taking them, the numbers were going down. But although the numbers were going down, it's heading to a good place. And this is one of the reasons why these cause and effect relationships in our life and our practice are something that are very difficult to predict. Something that you can plan a pretty picnic for, but you can't always, predict the weather, predict what it's going to be like. So I remember a few years back, this is one of the things that I actually went to temple yesterday, and one person asked a question about the environment. What, Bhante, can you give us some advice about kind of like saving the environment or protecting the environment? And said, well, as a monk, we have this kind of sphere. Like my sphere is like the monk sphere. It's the Dhamma, so I can advise along that, that type of sphere. But as far as the kind of environment goes, kind of making these policies and various things, that's something that non-monks take care of, And so when monks and non-monks work together, then it becomes like a kind of teamwork effort. So you can advise people like, well, don't be harmful. But as far as the specifics of working at that policy, that's up to them, up to the people who are living in the world. But having said that, before I became a monk, or no, it was actually right around the time I went to the monastery, there was kind of this big, looming stock market crash right at the end of George Bush's term and before Obama's term. And I remember reading about that and trying to figure out what was, going on with this kind of stock market crash. And what it turned out was there were people who were kind of, these people on Wall Street, they'll get like a kind of a contract, and they'll put all these kind of things on the contract, then they'll trade it with other people, and sometimes people don't even know what they're trading. They just know that the numbers are going up. And so this was kind of like a bunch of contracts, I think based on mortgage debt, People had done a bunch of, made some financial instruments around mortgage debt. By the way, they even trade like contracts for orange juice. So like farmers will contract with like a lumber mill or something like that, or so, whatever it might be, like orange juice or wheat or something. Okay, we're going to have this much wheat, so, pay us, you'll let us mill our wheat for this price. And then they'll start trading that on Wall Street, these contracts these farmers have. But in any event, what happened was people were making these kind of financial instruments, I guess, around these things, and banks started taking on debt to meet short-term objectives in their kind of, these CEOs were getting paid based on like short-term bonuses. So as long as their numbers were going up, things were good. And they started taking on debt to buy more and more of these mortgage-backed assets, is what they called them. And in doing so, as long as people kept buying them, then they kept going up in price. And so it looked like people were making money. But what was actually happening was there was not a lot of money to be made. People were in debt, taking on mortgages they couldn't pay for. And so eventually when people started to realize this, then people started to sell. And then it starts kind of going down, down, down very fast. And there was one company at the center of all this. And I remember when I was a young man, this would be like the company you wanted to work for. It was called Bear Stearns. And they were at the center of all these various debt chains, or in the, so like one bank would lend money to another and another one, and they were in like a huge crisscross. So when the time came that people wanted their money back, they couldn't kind of get the loops together fast enough, and this humongous company just ended up going insolvent. And then a lot of Wall Street was in big trouble. And because people need banks, it looked like the economy was in big trouble. And kind of consumer confidence plummeted. But at the time that these mortgage-backed assets were being traded, the numbers were going up, 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 up. People were really kind of buying into them. And if you weren't, it's like, what's going on here? You're not making that much money. You've got to kind of make money on these things. So this is why in Buddhism, always the weight of our decision-making is put on the intention. Because although we can't necessarily see the way that all these various lines come together, the Buddha kind of explains that, if you do things with a good intention, then that in itself creates what's called good karma, good kamma. In other words, there's an energy to that, there's a kind of power to that kind of pulls things together when it's called they ripen. Yeah? So this is why we always put our intention on this, and why kind of when people come to meditate, when people are looking to meditate, meditation teachers, like especially if you go stay with the ajahns, it's very interesting the way that they kind of evaluate people. I remember one time I was staying at a monastery in the States with a teacher I really revered. And I was staying there, and then one time, monasteries are open, so people can just come into them. Monasteries and temples, right? You don't need like a pass, you just come in. So you get all kinds of people coming in. And one time I was just there walking around the central area. And this one guy was there walking around, and I went up to him and I said, how you doing? Can I help you? He looks like he was looking for something. And the way he was talking was very strange. He was going, I don't know. Kind of the way his mannerisms were kind of unusual. It's like, okay, well, I don't know what's going on. It's a bit of an unusual character. And so then every afternoon, the teacher would have this question and answer session where we kind of look at people like, okay, you have a question? Do you have a question? Do you have a question? Yeah, he's kind of, and then if you had a question, he'd answer it. If you didn't, he'd keep going. And so he kept going around the circle, and he came to this fellow who was still there in the afternoon. And he's like, do you have a question? And the fellow goes, I don't know if I should ask you any questions because I've been drinking today. So, so he came to the monastery and he was drunk. And not only that, at forest monasteries, you can stay as a guest. So like in the temples, like here, there's just not much space for non-monks to stay as guests. But if if you're going to go to a forest monastery, there's sometimes hours outside of the city. So if you want to go, you can book to stay. And so this fellow had booked to stay for a week. That was his first day. He was there. So as he said that, I was thinking, all right, I lived at other monasteries. I was like, he's getting kicked out. Can't show up at a monastery drunk. Kind of like you expect to be staying at the monastery. But in any event, the teacher, who's known for being very strict, actually, you can be very afraid of him. He'll yell at people. Like he doesn't have any. He's very friendly too, but you don't know, what's going to happen. He keeps you on your toes. So he's known and renowned for his strictness. And when this fellow said that, I was like, all right, here we go. But he didn't say anything. The teacher was just like, okay, well then, and he just moved on to the next person. Didn't say anything to the guy. So he was just there. And then amazingly enough, the week went on and the fellow just kept staying, and he gradually started to participate in more and more activities. And he came to almost all the meditation sittings. And by the end of the week, he was just kind of going along with the flow of the monastery, participating kind of very well. And then that same time I was at that monastery, there was this very kind of, they looked like they were a well-to-do couple, kind of a well-to-do couple. And they came. And I think the first night the lady was there, she put this note on the toilet, like, please leave the toilet seat up. And they were kind of competent people. But he said that those people can never come back to the monastery again. And I never saw him really say that to many other people. So I went and asked I found this out from one of his senior monks there. And I asked him, I said, I was really inspired the way that, that one fellow, he was kind of, maybe had some problems, but he just kept staying at the monastery. By the time he was gone, he was good. And that's when this fellow said, well, that rich couple, he said they could never come back again. And here's what they did. And so it's partially because of their intentions. It's partially because a skilled meditation teacher, what they look for is not so much how much money a person has or what kind of status a person has. It's what their intentions are in coming to practice meditation. Because when a person has good intentions to practice meditation, although they're in a very bad situation, although their life may not be going the best, although they may have made some mistakes, they're in a position where they can progress. They're in a position where they can move forward. But if somebody is in a very kind of affluent situation, and they have a very conceited, very arrogant mind state about their position, about their wealth, about the way other people treat them, they're in a position where they can't move forward. It can be very difficult to teach a person like that. So I remember, this is not everybody who's affluent, by the way. There's good and bad people of every degree. But remember, there was one time, there was a doctor who came to the meditation class here. I don't know if anybody was here that time, but he's kind of a wealthy fellow. And he came after, that day I gave a talk on the jhanas. And after the talk, he said something like, that's like a pre-Buddhist thing. And he spent like, a couple minutes criticizing me, like everything I said in the talk. And I was like, well, the jhanas are pretty uncontroversial. But right there, I thought about, if this fellow comes back and he ever says something like that again, I'll ask him not to come. Yeah. Despite, he came up to me afterwards. He's like, I know this monk. He's like listing, I know this person, kind of listing his contacts in the Buddhist community. But that doesn't really have any relevance in terms of his ability to move forward in the practice of meditation. So this is why the Buddha places emphasis on this factor of right intention. Having intentions of non-harming, having intentions of renunciation, having intentions of goodwill. Because when one has these intentions, if one's in a high place, one is headed for good things. If one's in a low place, one is headed for good things. Lacking these intentions, one is headed downwards. It's just like this kind of stock market, you know. Even though the numbers are going up, if a person's doing bad deeds, if their intentions are bad, although all the statistics seem like they should keep climbing, the day will come when there's a crash. And similarly, even though somebody's life, somebody's practice seems like it's going down, if that person has good intentions, if they're undertaking good actions, the day comes when they're headed for a boom. They're headed for a spike. And so all the time we place our weight on these intentions. And when we do this, we gain a type of freedom. We gain a freedom from worrying about what we are to worrying about what we're becoming. Worrying about what we're practicing. Because what other people think we are, the labels, the outcomes, the statistics about how much weight we can lift, what type of job we have, how much money we earn, all these things are things that are like a pretty picnic. You can plan for them. If the weather's nice, then you have a good picnic. But you can't predict the weather. So sometimes you have a pretty picnic in good weather. Sometimes you plan and they fall apart. But when a person has their weight on the intention rather than the outcome, more so the intention, we also have to think about the outcomes, they gain a freedom from this type of worry. Because fully, 100%, we are in control of our intentions. And if this is where the weight of our practice is, this is where the weight of our happiness is, then although we can't predict the weather, although it might rain at the pretty picnic, we still have something to rest on. We can still feel more at ease. So this is what ended up saying to that, this is some of the teachings of the Buddha, the way the Buddha emphasizes, and this is what ended up discussing with that one person in the healthcare field, which is that, you know, although we can't save everybody from dying, as long as we have good intentions, we can rest on that. Regardless of what the statistics are, we're making good karma. We're in a place where our lines are going up, where our stock market graph is climbing. Climbing in goodness, climbing in happiness, climbing in ease. Climbing in these things regardless of what the numbers say, regardless of what the weather at the picnic will be like. And all of this is because the thing that we truly own is our actions. The thing that we truly control is our intentions. And what truly comes with us, regardless of where we are, is our minds. So if we make these a nice place to stay, then our world becomes nice. Our world becomes a good place to stay. And we gain happiness from that.